"Get this damn slop off my tray now." Commander Thorne's voice cut through the low hum of the chow hall like a rifle shot. Every head in the room snapped toward the source. SEALs, intel analysts, support staff, they all froze, forks halfway to their mouths. The commander, a man carved from granite and fury, shoved his tray across the serving line. It clattered to a stop inches from the hands of a 22-year-old culinary specialist named Leo Martinez. "Did you hear me, sailor?" Thorne's eyes, the color of a stormy sea, narrowed to slits. "I said get this slop out of my sight. My dog wouldn't eat this garbage." The other cooks exchanged nervous glances, but Leo didn't flinch. He simply met the commander's gaze, his own expression unreadable. He picked up the tray, his movements deliberate and calm. He felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on him. He could feel their pity, their amusement, their contempt. To them, he was just part of the machinery, the guy who served the eggs, the guy who scrubbed the pots, invisible. But in that moment, as Commander Thorne sneered and turned away, Leo felt something else. A flicker of a fire he thought had long been extinguished. He wasn't just holding a tray of rejected food. He was holding the weight of a broken promise to his father, the burden of a deferred dream, and a secret so profound it could shatter the very foundation of this base. But that would come later. Right now, he was just Leo, the cook, and as he scraped the commander's breakfast into the trash, he knew this was just the beginning of another long day. A day he had to survive for a reason none of these elite warriors could ever possibly imagine. The sun over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was a merciless, white-hot disk. It bleached the color from the sky and baked the concrete until heat shimmered up from the ground. For the SEALs, it was just another Tuesday. Another day of brutal training, of pushing their bodies and minds to the absolute limit. For Leo Martinez, it was another 16-hour shift in a kitchen that felt like the inside of a blast furnace. The day began long before dawn, in the quiet hum of industrial refrigerators. Leo moved with an economy of motion learned over 2 years of relentless routine. Slicing vegetables, hauling 50-pound bags of flour, ensuring the coffee was hot and strong enough to wake the dead. It was monotonous, thankless work, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it paid for the oxygen tanks. Just a year and a half ago, Leo had been sitting in a lecture hall at Stanford, studying geopolitical history. He had a plan, a future, then the call came. His father, a man who had spent 30 years working the coal mines of West Virginia, had collapsed. Black lung disease, the doctor said. His lungs were scarred, failing. The mining company's insurance was a joke. The bills were astronomical. That night, sitting by his father's hospital bed, listening to the strained, painful rasp of his breathing, Leo made a choice. He dropped out of college, walked into a recruiter's office, and signed on the dotted line. The Navy offered a steady paycheck and the best healthcare in the world. He asked for the fastest route to a paycheck. They offered him culinary specialist. So now, instead of writing papers on Cold War strategy, he was serving chipped beef on toast to men who saw him as little more than a walking vending machine. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was the invisibility. The SEALs moved through the base like gods among mortals. They were bigger, faster, harder than everyone else, and they knew it. When they walked into the chow hall, a hush would fall. They didn't stand in line. They didn't say please or thank you. They took what they wanted, and people like Leo were expected to just get out of the way. Commander David Thorne was the worst of them all. He was a legend in the teams, a Mustangan officer who had come up from the enlisted ranks. He'd fought in every hellhole from the Hindu Kush to the Horn of Africa. He had a chest full of medals and a heart full of ice. He believed there were 2 types of people in the world, warriors and everyone else. And he had nothing but contempt for the latter. He seemed to take a special pleasure in tormenting Leo Martinez. He'd bark, even if Leo was standing 3 feet away. "This coffee tastes like bilge water. Make another pot." "Martinez, there's a spot on this fork. You trying to get my men sick?" Leo never talked back. He never showed anger. He just took it. He'd nod, say yes, Commander, and do as he was told. He'd retreat into the cavern of his own mind, to a place where he wasn't a cook, where his father could breathe freely, and where his life hadn't taken such a sharp, brutal turn. His only escape was at night, long after the base had fallen quiet, when the only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the lonely cry of gulls. Leo would sit in his cramped barracks room. He wouldn't be studying cookbooks, he'd have a worn, leather-bound notebook open, filled with strange, spidery script. He'd listen to old recordings on a small digital player, his lips moving silently, forming words that no one on this entire coast would understand. It was his mother's language. She had been a doctor, a volunteer with a humanitarian aid group. She'd spent years in the most remote corners of the world. She'd met his father there, fallen in love, and brought him back to America. She passed away when Leo was just a boy, but she left him with her journals, her recordings, and her language. A language spoken by only a few thousand people, in a single, isolated valley nestled between the towering peaks of Afghanistan and Pakistan. It was all he had left of her, a secret connection to a world no one here knew existed. One afternoon, a few weeks after the tray incident, Thorne cornered him. He was mopping the floor of the empty chow hall. "Martinez," the commander said, his voice a low growl. "They tell me your test scores were off the charts. Stanford, right?" Leo stopped mopping, his knuckles white on the handle. "Yes, Commander." Thorne took a step closer, looking him up and down, as if he were a bug under a microscope. "So what the hell happened? A mind like that, and you're swabbing my decks. Did you get scared? Couldn't handle the pressure?" Leo's jaw tightened. He could feel the heat rising in his neck. He thought of his father, the wheezing sound of the oxygen machine that was his constant companion. "I had family matters to attend to, Commander." Thorne let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound. Family matters. "That's what the weak always say. You had a gift, son. And you threw it away to flip pancakes. It's a damn shame." He turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing in a puddle of dirty water, the insult hanging in the air like poison gas. That night, Leo called home. "Hey, Dad, how are you feeling?" He could hear the struggle for breath on the other end of the line. "Same as always, son, but I'm breathing. That's what counts." There was a pause. "That money you sent, it covered the new tanks. Thank you, Leo. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't worry about it, Dad. You just focus on getting better." "Are they treating you all right out there? You working with good men?" Leo looked around his small, sterile room. He thought of Thorne's sneering face. He forced a smile into his voice. "They're the best in the world, Dad, the absolute best." He hung up the phone, the lead tasting like ash in his mouth. He picked up his mother's journal and opened it to a random page. He ran his fingers over her elegant, unfamiliar script. He needed to remember who he was, not the cook, not the disappointment. He was the son of a doctor who saved lives. And he was the son of a coal miner who taught him how to endure. He didn't know it then, but he was going to need every ounce of that endurance. Because a storm was gathering thousands of miles away. A storm that was hurtling towards this very base. And when it hit, the fate of hundreds of men wouldn't rest on the shoulders of a SEAL warrior, but on the secret hidden in the heart of the invisible man who served them breakfast. The atmosphere on the base shifted overnight. It started as a low thrum of anxiety, a subtle change in the air that only those who lived and breathed the military life could detect, unscheduled drills at odd hours. Grim-faced intelligence officers hurrying across the quad, their jaws set. The normal, boisterous energy of the SEALs was replaced by a tense, coiled silence. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. In the chow hall, Leo heard whispers, fragments of conversations not meant for his ears. Chatter's gone through the roof. Can't get a lock on the dialect. The guys at the NSA are calling it a ghost language. HVT-1 is on the move, and he's planning something big. Something that makes 9/11s look like a firecracker. The tension finally boiled over in the Tactical Operations Center, the nerve center of the base. It was a cavernous, windowless room, bathed in the cold blue glow of a dozen giant monitors. For 3 days straight, the best minds in naval special warfare had been locked in that room, fueled by stale coffee and rising panic. They were listening to a ghost, an intercepted transmission captured by a drone loitering high over the jagged peaks of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The voice was calm, clear, and utterly indecipherable. It wasn't Pashto. It wasn't Dari, or Urdu, or any of the other 50 languages their linguists were trained in. They ran it through every translation algorithm the CIA had. Nothing. They sent it to allied intelligence agencies. Blank stares. It was as if the man was speaking a language from another planet. Commander Thorne had been in the talk for 72 hours straight. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform was rumpled, and his legendary temper was simmering just below the surface. Every few hours, a call would come in from the Pentagon, each one more demanding than the last. "What do you have, David?" "Nothing yet, Admiral." "That's not good enough. Find me something, or I'll find someone who can." The pressure was immense. They knew a major attack was imminent. They had the voice of the man planning it, but they had no idea what he was saying. It was like watching a bomb's timer tick down without being able to see the numbers. Finally, Thorne snapped. He slammed his fist down on the central console, making a young intel analyst jump. 3 days, he roared, his voice echoing in the chilled room. The entire multi-trillion-dollar U.S. intelligence apparatus, and we can't figure out what one goat herder is saying into a damn radio. Is this a joke? No one dared to answer. He ripped a transcript of the garbled, phonetic nonsense from a printer and stormed out of the talk, his face a mask of pure rage. He needed air. He needed to hit something. He burst out into the blinding California sun and stalked across the base, the useless piece of paper crumpled in his fist. He didn't know where he was going. He was just moving. And his path took him straight toward the chow hall. It was mid-afternoon, the quiet lull between lunch and dinner. Leo was on his hands and knees, scrubbing a stubborn grease stain from the floor. The place was nearly empty. Thorne kicked the door open and strode to the center of the room. He was a caged lion, radiating frustration. He saw Leo and a few other kitchen staff, and in his rage, he needed an audience. He needed to vent. He held up the crumpled transcript. "You see this?" he bellowed to the empty hall. "This is the sound of our failure. The voice of the man who is going to kill American soldiers, and we're all sitting around with our thumbs up our backsides because no one nitrogen monoxide one can understand it." He was pacing now, a predator in his cage. "I'm so sick of it, the excuses, the we're trying, sirs, the incompetence." He stopped, his eyes wild. He looked around the room, at the cooks, the janitors, the people he never saw. And then a bitter, sarcastic idea bloomed in his mind. He let out a humorless laugh. "You know what? I'll make you a deal." He spoke to the room, to anyone, to no one. "Any man on this base, I don't care if you're a pipe hitter or a damn floor sweeper, anyone who can tell me what this garbage means." He paused for dramatic effect, his voice dripping with scorn. "I will personally walk you to the front gate of Buddy S, a guaranteed shot at being a SEAL. That's how desperate I am." He laughed again, a harsh, grating sound. It was a joke. An impossible offer meant to underscore the futility of their situation. The few SEALs in the room chuckled along with him. The cook a SEAL. The idea was absurd. But Leo Martinez had stopped scrubbing. He slowly, deliberately, rose to his feet. He wiped his greasy hands on his apron. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He thought of his father. He thought of his mother. He thought of the endless nights spent with her journals, listening to her voice speaking these strange, beautiful words. Commander Thorne was about to turn and leave, his theatrical outburst over. But a quiet voice cut through the silence. "Commander!" Thorne stopped. He turned around slowly. Leo Martinez took a single step forward. The whole world seemed to narrow to the space between these two men. "Commander," Leo said again, his voice steady, though his insides were churning. I think I can help you with that." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the distant buzz of the fluorescent lights. The handful of SEALs who had been smirking at their commander's joke now stared, their expressions frozen in disbelief. Commander Thorne's face went through a rapid series of emotions. First, confusion, then, incredulous amusement. And finally, a slow burning rage. "What did you just say to me, cook?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. Leo felt his throat go dry, but he held the commander's gaze. "I said I think I can translate that for you, sir." A rough bark of laughter erupted from Thorne. He looked around at the other men as if to say, "Can you believe this guy? You?" Thorne took a menacing step forward, closing the distance between them until he was looming over Leo. "You flip burgers for a living. You think you can do what 100 PhDs at the NSA can't." "My mother," Leo began, his voice barely a whisper. "She was a doctor. She worked in the Wacken corridor for 10 years. The language, it's a dialect of Wacky. I grew up listening to it." Thorne's sneer didn't falter. "That's a real cute story. Martinez. Now get back to your pots and pans before I write you up for insubordination. He turned his back on Leo, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. The message was clear. You are nothing. Go away. But Leo didn't move. They're talking about the water, Leo said, his voice suddenly louder, more confident. The words were just tumbling out of him now, dredged up from a deep well of memory, but it's not water. It's a metaphor. It means the supply route, the convoy. Thorne froze mid-stride. He slowly turned back around, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. What did you say? The word they're using for shepherd, Leo continued, his eyes unfocused as he accessed the language in his mind. It's a code. It means the target, the high-ranking official. They're planning to hit the supply convoy when the general is visiting Fob Fiddler's Green tomorrow. A young intel officer who had followed Thorne out of the talk rushed forward, his face pale. Sir General Mattis is scheduled for an inspection tour of Fiddler's Green tomorrow at 0900. It's on the classified itinerary. The air in the chow hall crackled with sudden, unbearable tension. The joke was over. Thorne stared at Leo, his mind racing. It could be a lucky guess, a coincidence, or it could be real. And if it was real, and he ignored it, the blood of a 4-star general and dozens of soldiers would be on his hands. He made a decision. You, he barked, pointing a finger at Leo, with me, now. He turned and strode back toward the talk, not waiting to see if Leo was following. The two men walked across the quad in a bubble of silence. SEALs stopped their training to stare at the bizarre sight, the most decorated officer on the base, followed by the anonymous cook, still in his grease-stained apron. When they reached the steel door of the talk, the armed Marine guard stepped forward to block Leo's path. I'm sorry, sir, he doesn't have clearance. Thorne didn't even break stride. He's with me. His clearance is my voice. Open the door. The Marine snapped to attention and opened the door. Leo stepped inside. The blast of cold air was a shock after the heat of the kitchen. The room was a shrine to technology and data, screens flickering with satellite feeds, maps, and lines of encrypted text. The dozen or so analysts and officers inside looked up as they entered, their faces etched with exhaustion. They saw Thorne, and then they saw the cook. The room fell into a stunned silence. Sit him down, Thorne ordered the young intel officer. Give him the raw audio feed, the one from 0400 this morning. The analyst hesitated. Sir, that's above top secret. Do it, Thorne roared. The analyst scrambled to comply, pulling up a chair to his station and gesturing for Leo. Leo sat down, his heart pounding. The analyst handed him a set of high-tech headphones. They felt alien in his hands, which were calloused from holding knives and scouring pads. He slid them over his ears, shutting out the hum of the room. The file is loaded, the analyst whispered, his voice full of doubt. Press play when you're ready. Leo took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked up and saw every eye in the room on him. He saw Commander Thorne, standing with his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask of skepticism and desperation. He closed his eyes. He thought of his mother's warm smile. He thought of her voice, telling him stories in a language that was their secret bond. Then, he pressed play. A stream of static crackled in his ears, followed by the voice. It was crisp, cold, and confident, and it was speaking the language of his childhood. The words washed over Leo, and for a moment, he wasn't in a high-tech command center in California. He was a little boy again, sitting at his mother's feet, listening to her read from her journals. The cadence, the intonation, the unique, guttural sounds, it was all as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. He opened his eyes. He picked up a pen and began to write. The men in the talk watched, transfixed. Leo's hand flew across the notepad, filling it with the spidery script of the wacky language, and next to it, the stark, simple English translation. He was no longer hesitant. He was completely absorbed, his head cocked to one side as he listened intently. After a few minutes, he paused the recording and took off the headphones. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at Thorne. I was wrong, Leo said, his voice clear and steady. A wave of disappointment washed over the room. Thorne's jaw tightened. He knew it was too good to be true. It's not the convoy, Leo continued, his eyes burning with intensity. That was a diversion. The water, it's not the supply route. It's literal. They're talking about the culvert, the main drainage pipe that runs under the northern perimeter of the base. He pointed to a line he had written. This phrase here, the hollow snake that sleeps beneath the sand, that's what they're calling it. The young intel analyst quickly pulled up a schematic of Fob Fiddler's Green. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He zoomed in on the northern wall. There it was. A concrete drainage culvert, 3 feet in diameter, big enough for a man to crawl through. They're not hitting the convoy from the outside, Leo said, his voice dropping as he realized the full, terrifying scope of the plan. They're already inside, or they will be. They're going to use the culvert to bypass the perimeter entirely. He pressed play again, listening for another minute. His face went pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What is it, Martinez?" Thorne demanded, his voice sharp as glass. Leo looked up, his eyes wide with horror. "The shepherd, it's not the general. That was misdirection, too. It's the chow hall. They're calling it that because it's where all the sheep gather to eat." He tapped the notepad again. "They're going to infiltrate through the culvert and attack the mess hall during the general's visit, when it's packed with over 500 soldiers, including the command staff. They have suicide vests." He looked at the clock on the wall. "They're planning to do it at 0900 tomorrow." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a catastrophic, unthinkable plan. An attack from within, aimed at decapitating the entire leadership of the region in one fiery blast. Thorne grabbed a secure phone and barked into it. "Get me the commander of Fiddler's Green, now. And get me a predator feet over that northern perimeter. I want eyes on that culvert 5 minutes ago." The talk exploded into a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Phones rang. People shouted orders. The room, which had been paralyzed by uncertainty, was now electrified with purpose. In the center of it all sat Leo Martinez, the cook, the headphones still resting around his neck. He watched the massive screens as a live drone feed blinked into existence, showing a grainy, black and white image of a desolate stretch of sand. The drone's camera zoomed in on the dark, circular opening of the drainage pipe. For 10 agonizing minutes, they watched nothing. And then a flicker of movement. A head emerged from the darkness of the pipe, then another, and another. 3 figures, dressed in local garb, scrambled out of the culvert and melted into the pre-dawn shadows, moving swiftly toward the base. "We have visual confirmation," an analyst yelled. 3 hostiles, moving toward the wire. "They're inside the wire," Thorne corrected him, his voice grim. "Martinez, you son of a bitch, you did it." He looked at Leo, and for the first time, he wasn't looking at a cook. He was looking at a weapon, a secret weapon he never even knew he had. The crisis was averted. The 3 infiltrators were neutralized before they ever reached the chow hall. The general's visit was postponed. Hundreds of lives were saved. And it was all because of the quiet, invisible man who scrubbed their floors. As the sun rose over Coronado, casting long shadows across the base, the adrenaline in the talk finally began to fade, replaced by a profound sense of exhaustion and disbelief. Commander Thorne walked over to the station where Leo was still sitting, staring at the screens. The other analysts and officers gave them a wide berth, sensing the gravity of the moment. Thorne stood before him, silent for a long moment. He looked at the young man's tired face, the smudges of grease still on his uniform. He thought of all the times he had berated him, belittled him, treated him as less than human. The shame was a physical weight in his chest. "Martinez," he began, his voice raspy. He cleared his throat. "Leo, He didn't know what to say. "Thank you" felt laughably inadequate. "I'm sorry" felt like an insult. He settled on the only question that mattered. "Who are you?" Leo finally looked up from the screens, his eyes cold with a weariness that had nothing to do with being awake all night. "I'm just a guy trying to take care of his dad, Commander." And then, for the first time, Leo told him everything. About Stanford, about his father's illness, about his mother, the doctor who had given him a gift he never knew he'd need. He spoke quietly, without a trace of anger or resentment. He was just stating the facts of his life. Thorne listened, his expression unreadable. When Leo finished, the commander just stood there, the silence stretching between them. Finally, he spoke. "That offer I made in the chow hall," he said, his voice low. "It wasn't a joke, not anymore." He turned to the young intel officer. "Get me the admiral on the line. And find me the paperwork for an inter-service transfer and a direct assignment to basic underwater demolition and SEAL training." The officer's eyes widened. "Sir, there's a 2-year waiting list. and he'd need a waiver for. I don't care if you have to get it signed by God himself. Thorne cut him off, his voice like steel. This man is going to Buddy S, and he's going with my personal, unconditional recommendation. Make it happen. He turned back to Leo. Your days of flipping pancakes are over, son. Get your gear. You and I are going for a walk. News travels fast on a military base. By the time Thorne and Leo walked out of the talk, the story was already the stuff of legend. The cook who spoke the ghost language. The invisible man who saved a base. As they crossed the quad, the same SEALs who had once looked through Leo now stopped and stared. They saw him walking side by side with their commander, and their expressions shifted from confusion to a dawning, grudging respect. One of them, a massive Master Chief with a beard like a steel brush, stepped forward and blocked their path. He looked at Leo, then at Thorne, then he looked back at Leo and simply nodded. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. It was acceptance, it was an acknowledgement. You are one of us. They didn't stop at the Buddy S administrative office. Thorne walked Leo all the way to the office of the base commander, a rear admiral with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen it all. The admiral stood as they entered. He didn't look at Thorne. He looked at Leo. Son, he said, extending a hand. I've just spent the last hour on the phone with the Secretary of the Navy. It seems you've made quite an impression. Leo shook his hand, unsure of what to say. I just did what anyone would have done, sir. No, the admiral said, his gaze firm. You did what no one else could do, and you did it with humility and honor. That's the mark of a warrior. He turned to Thorne. Commander, your request has been approved. Martinez reports to Buddy S, Class 368, in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Leo's world was spinning. That evening, he was finally able to call his father. Dad, it's me. Leo, I saw it on the news. They didn't use your name, but they said a sailor at Coronado's son. Was that you? Leo could hear the hope and fear in his father's strained voice. Yeah, Dad, it was me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the soft hiss of the oxygen machine. Then he heard a sound he hadn't heard in years, the sound of his father weeping. I'm so proud of you, son. He finally managed to say your mother, she would be so proud. Dad, Leo said, his own voice thick with emotion. They're sending me to SEAL training. I'm going to get my chance. You go give 'em hell, son, his father said, his voice filled with a strength Leo hadn't heard in a long time. You go and be the man I always knew you were. As he packed his few belongings in his barracks room that night, Leo picked up his mother's journal. He opened it to the first page. In her elegant script, she had written a single line in her native Waki. He had translated it years ago. It read, "The deepest rivers flow in silence." He smiled, a true, genuine smile. For 2 years, he had been silent, he had been invisible. But he had been flowing all along, a deep river of hidden strength and forgotten knowledge. And now the river was finally meeting the sea. His journey was just beginning. Years passed. The story of the cook who saved Fiddler's Green became a quiet legend within the walls of naval special warfare. It was a story told to new recruits at Buddy S, a lesson in humility and a stark reminder that heroes come in all forms. Commander Thorne, now Captain Thorne, made it a mandatory part of his orientation speech for every new class of operators. He'd stand before 100 shivering, exhausted young men, their faces smeared with sand and grime, and he would tell them about a quiet culinary specialist named Leo Martinez. We are the tip of the spear, he'd say, his voice resonating across the grinder. But you are nothing without the shaft. You are nothing without the men and women who fuel our jets, who pack our parachutes, who cook our meals. The strongest man in the room is not always the one with the biggest muscles. Sometimes it's the one you never even bothered to see. He never told them that he himself had been the one who couldn't see. That was a private shame he carried, a penance that made him a better, more thoughtful leader. He made it his personal mission to change the culture, to break down the walls between the operators and the support staff. He implemented new programs, fostered joint training exercises, and made sure every single person on his base, from the SEAL in his fire team to the sailor scrubbing the decks, knew they were a vital part of the same mission. And Leo, he didn't just survive Buddy S, he thrived. The same quiet endurance that had gotten him through the contempt of the chow hall got him through Hell Week. The same sharp intellect that had allowed him to master a complex language allowed him to master complex mission planning. He wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but he was the smartest. And he had a core of inner strength that the instructors couldn't break because it had already been forged in the fires of family crisis. He earned his trident, and he went on to become one of the most respected and effective officers in the teams. His unique linguistic skills made him invaluable. He could go into villages where no American had ever been able to communicate, and he could sit and drink tea with the elders, building bridges of trust that were stronger than any fortress wall. He didn't just fight wars, he prevented them. Our story ends on a moonless night, deep in a hostile valley that looks uncannily like the ones his mother used to describe. A team of SEALs gathers in a tight circle around their platoon commander, their faces painted in camouflage, their gear making soft, muted clicks in the silence. They're about to execute a dangerous raid on a high-value target. The platoon commander kneels in the center, tracing a map in the dirt with the tip of his knife. He speaks in a low, confident voice, issuing final orders, his words precise and calm. Alpha Team, you have the outer perimeter. Bravo, you're with me on the primary breach. Remember the intel. This guy is not to be taken alive. But the woman and children in the compound, they are not to be harmed. We get in, we get the target, and we are gone before the sun comes up. Are we clear? A chorus of soft hooyahs answers him. The platoon commander looks up, his eyes scanning the faces of his men. Visible only in the faint green glow of their night vision goggles, he nods. Let's go to work. He stands up, and for the first time, we see him clearly. It's Lieutenant Leo Martinez. The trident is pinned proudly on his chest. His face is leaner now, harder, etched with the experience of a dozen deployments. But his eyes are the same, quiet, observant, deep. He is no longer invisible. He is a leader of the most elite warriors on the planet. The lesson of his story is a simple but powerful one. It's a message that resonates far beyond the battlefield. True strength isn't about arrogance or titles, it's about character. It's about the hidden talents and untold stories that exist in everyone around us if we only have the wisdom to look. It's about understanding that the person you dismiss today might be the one who saves you tomorrow. Leo Martinez was a cook. He was also a scholar, a protector, a son, and a hero. His journey reminds us that our circumstances do not define our potential. The most important battles are often the ones fought in silence, and the greatest victories are won not with fists, but with a heart that refuses to give up. So, what did you think of Leo's story? It's a powerful reminder that there are heroes all around us, often in the places we least expect. Maybe you know someone like that. A person with a hidden talent or an incredible story of quiet perseverance. I'd love for you to share your own stories in the comments below. Who is the unsung hero in your life? Let's fill the comments with tales of these incredible people. And if this story moved you, please do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Every share helps these stories reach more people and spread a little more hope in the world. Thank you so much for watching, and always remember to look beyond the uniform, beyond the job title, and see the person standing in front of you. You never know whose life you might change.